So this season feels like it's already going so quickly. Here I am sitting almost on the 14th of January, and I'm my second podcast in, and it's a biggie. It's a biggie. It's a topic that I guess a lot of us don't really discuss in the hunting industry until this very point, until last week sometime when Mark Zuckerberg came onto a format to discuss the upgraded policies from Meta side. And that's an incredible win for our industry, I believe, and I will deep dive into that in this episode. So guys, before we start, I just want to take this opportunity to once again thank everyone for the incredible amounts of support. I know I do this every single podcast, but you guys don't understand how much it means to me. So if you haven't yet, please, I would really appreciate it if you go along, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and if you enjoy this episode, interact on whichever platform you are listening to. To the Carbon Accord TV guys, welcome once again. It's so wonderful to have you guys on board, and I get to voice my podcast across your guys' incredible platform. So thank you so much for that. I am forever blessed and ever grateful. To everyone out there, I hope Dallas Safari Club was a huge success, especially to the outfitters and of course, everyone looking to purchase or get involved in their very first African safari adventure. I hope you guys had some tremendous amounts of success. It's not over yet. There's still a couple of shows, Houston, SCI, and a couple of the smaller ones, the Great American Outdoor show coming up. So good luck for that. I hope you guys really, and if you still have got any questions, I appreciate everyone interacting with the last episode, and I hope that we helped you guys along the way. So yeah, good luck. Smash it out there, enjoy the shows. It's a wonderful time of the year. It really is, especially for our hunting industry. And I'm itching to get over, but I know next year will be just as good. So looking forward to that one. So without further ado, let's get into it. So guys, like mentioned before, huge news coming out of the Facebook era, particularly from Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta. What an incredible announcement he made last week, and a big one for that. And we're going to deep dive into it. So I do apologize in advance for referring back to my iPad. So what happened in the past couple of weeks or past couple of days, I had various amounts. So my social media platform is the base of where PH Journals was essentially born. And over the recent couple of days and stuff, I've, obviously with the success of the podcast and all that sort of stuff, I wanted to expand my broader, I don't like the word fan base, but the broader following out there. So I deep dived into a couple of experts that are familiar with this sort of field, from social media marketers to influencers to a whole bunch of different people. And what I got out of it was immensely valuable, especially for the future of PH Journals, but most importantly, for the future of the hunting industry. Now, I'm going to try and dissect this as best as I possibly can, and I'm very fortunate that I had a couple of discussions. So I've broken it down into very simple terms, because as hunters, we don't like all the back office stuff, right? We like to get to the point. Let's have it done. Let's have it said. And what does this mean for us moving forward? So I'm going to try and break it down as best as I possibly can. So once again, I apologize for referring back to my iPad. But with a topic this important and this big, it is really important for us to make sure that we got all the facts and basics right. Because once again, and I'll mention this a little bit later, the responsibility as a hunter right now is bigger than ever before. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So if you haven't yet, here is a very short snippet of Mark Zuckerberg mentioning some of the policy changes from the Meta side.
And restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and
So I'm going to stop it there, but if you guys kind of get the point, and here are some of the highlighted points, and I'll have them up on the screen now. So obviously Mark just basically highlighted removal of third-party fact checkers and reliance on community-based notes, similar to the Twitter, now known as X format. Lifting restrictions on previously sensitive topics, including things like hunting. Automated systems to focus on illegal activities and severe violations, potentially creating a safer space for lawful hunting content. So I've put this into a basic general perspective from a hunting side of things. No longer suppressing political views or topics, allowing the broader discussion on kind of hunting related policies and conservation. So I've just highlighted what I presume that hunting would fall in. Meanwhile, it's a much broader avenue of things. So those of you that have experienced a little bit of restriction when it came to the meta side of things, especially through Instagram and more recently Facebook, those of you would know Instagram was renowned for this over the past couple of years, where they would actually shadow ban your account, so only the followers that you had at the time could see your content and all that sort of stuff. So, and then you would have to appeal, and would take an absolutely dismal amount of time to review it and go through all the different processes. So now what this essentially does, and I will deep dive into this overview a little bit later, but I wanted to highlight, so let's dissect it. So basically on the policy, so no more third-party fact checkers. So instead of outside companies, so third-party, they more lent on social media, they lent, and I could be wrong about this, but they lent, I felt they lent a little bit more towards the woke, the leftist side of things. So instead of outside companies deciding whether your statement, your content is true or false or ethical or any of that sort of stuff, it will rely on a public space, a public platform, everyday individuals that are in the hunting industry, majority of them, because that's the content that's going to be seen, will be able to form notes and form discussions on that particular topic and slashing it out on actual social media, whether it's an ethical way of doing things. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful win for the hunting industry, because essentially what it's going to do is just open up more honest and good conversation. Yes, you're going to get the tree huggers that are going to be kicking stones on every single one of your posts and all that sort of stuff. We've had it before, but now this is just going to be really out there and in the open, and a little bit more for us as content creators. We've got a little bit more freedom about, so we don't have to worry about, too much rifles or knives or any of that sort of stuff, because if it's not seen as negligence and irresponsible, then people they're going to really support the content you're putting out there. This new system lets the online community add notes to the post, giving more context to the information that has already been posted. So for instance, if I put out there a warthog, somebody can go on there and community note it and add that yes, warthog is a wonderful species, and this is the best time. Their personal opinion is the best time to hunt them, and it's illegal to hunt them at night. I'm kicking over a few examples over there. So it's less about few people judging your content, whether it's ethical or not, and rather the broader perspective of the community, right? So we will be based in the hunting community, and I would hope for the betterness of the content, that the hunters, the fellow hunting enthusiasts will be able to interact with that on a little bit more of a positive note. So if there is something that might be a little bit sketchy, from a positive side, us as hunters can say, oh, look, bud, like a little bit too much blood there, maybe let's consider cutting it down and stuff. But I'll get into that a little bit later about the responsibilities us as hunters have. So they've lifted restrictions, a lot of restrictions that were flagged in the community guidelines. And I'm assuming one of the big topics was hunting, because I experienced it. I know a couple of my other mates and stuff that have experienced a little bit of censorship over the past couple of years, especially from the meta side, like I said, from Instagram and a lot of the stuff from Facebook. So just another deep dive into this. In the past, Meta restricted posts sensitive topics, including hunting, by making them harder to find and reducing their reach. Now these restrictions are being lifted, meaning hunters can share stories and post more freely without fear of their content being hidden or blocked. And once again, the more the interaction happens, the better the algorithm, and a lot more positive will come from this. Meta's also decided on focusing on serious problems. Meta will put more effort into stopping illegal activities and harmful content like scams, hate speech, or criminal behavior, which is pretty much a standard practice. The shift allows lawful content like ethical hunting stories to stay up without being unfairly flagged or removed, right? So that is a big one, because a lot of our stuff out there that was flagged, that was censored, obviously a lot of us won our appeals all the time, but now it's just removing that unnecessary channel we had to go through. And then obviously the political side of things, I made it towards hunting. So previously posts about political issues might have been limited to how far they could spread. Meta is now removing those limits. This means topics like hunting conservation laws and wildlife policies can again have more attention and discussion online. Essentially what we are hoping for is to open up good and positive, healthy conversations, honest conversations. Of course, politics has a huge role to play within the South African hunting industry, most importantly, trophy industry. The exportation of trophies and stuff like that is a huge one. Of course, the UK have just put a ban to all trophy hunting. So I'm hoping a lot more of these topics that actually come up will be up there for discussion, and through community notes is a massive, massive win. Like I said, it's instead of it being removed and hidden away forever, now these topics are being brought to the surface and allowing us to have these conversations. So, what does this mean? What are the implications for the hunting industry? Now, this is a big one, because these are all based on a lot of the discussions I've had over the past couple of days, but also my personal opinion on where us as hunters can benefit from this. So what are the implications, but also the responsibilities. So before I get into it, greater freedom to share authentic hunting stories and highlight the culture and conservation aspects of hunting without fear of unnecessary censorships. Now, I never did. It's always in the back of your mind about the content you are putting out there. Whether you're depicting or reflecting yourself as a professional hunter in the best possible way, but also for the greater good of the community, right? So you don't want to represent the hunting community unethically and in a bad light. I'm sure majority of us hunters out there do that. Opportunities to educate a larger audience. Of course, we're going to touch surfaces now we've never had access to, or very rarely have had access to, even if it was for a brief couple of moments, seconds, days. Positive impacts into ethical hunting on the ecosystems and local communities. How the lifting of restrictions can reduce shadow banning and promote fairer visibility for hunting content and creators, right? So it's all about that honest and open conversation. So some of the benefits and opportunities I have highlighted based on educated discussions that I've had: greater transparency and community-driven accountability using the new notes model. This is awesome because it allows for the transparency to happen. I look back at a recent podcast I did with the guys from Salt Lake and how the misconception of a very small snippet was taken out of context. Not to put any blame or to shift any blame. The wording I used was completely wrong. I know, and I've issued my statements of apology and all that sort of stuff. I never ever once wanted to put the hunting community in any sort of bad light. However, I'm assuming with the community notes model, look, I'm not very familiar with the X side of things. So most recently I've started posting a lot on there, but I'm not 100% familiar. So from what I've learned and what I've understood over just very, very simple conversations, this will allow us to have good, honest conversations. Something that I would imagine I would be able to have around a campfire with a good mate of mine. I would be able to do the similar sort of approach. If we had any sort of disagreements, it would be done on a more respectable manner. Not just keyboard warriors in the comments throwing out statements that are kind of untrue. Ability to engage in open dialogue about hunting, addressing misconceptions, and advocating for conservation. Pretty much self-explanatory. I'm anticipating, and I'm willing to put my neck out there and say that there are going to be a lot now with these restrictions being uplifted. There are going to be more now than ever before bunny huggers that are going to try and upset the apple cart. And I'll get into the responsibilities a little bit later, but we need to make sure that our conversation within these notes and on fellow hunters community notes and all this sort of stuff is a good, ethical and morally correct conversation through healthy and honest conversation. How hunters can use these changes to promote ethical practices, respectful storytelling, and your personal brand to promote yourself out there in a very good ethical environment. So be the person you've always wanted to be without having any sort of restrictions hanging over. There's a mate of mine, I'm not going to mention any names, and I'm sure if he ever listens to these sort of podcasts and stuff, he'll be well aware of who I'm talking about. But in South Africa, he's a massive Trump supporter, like I'm sure many of us are. But he's next level, you know. In every single one of his hunting videos, there's always a Trump hat. He had a Trump banner on his stock fence at his farm and all this sort of stuff. So for him to be able to promote that side of his personality might be a very, very good thing, because I think guys with such bold personalities such as his in the hunting industry and in the hunting world is much needed, right? We need a bit of charismatic people out there, and humor and enjoyment and excitement out there. But I can't help but think that he felt a little bit restricted, because I mean, even his neighbors at one stage during the elections were cutting his banners down and removing them off his stock fence. So for me personally, I just think like that sort of personality is not going to get restricted anymore, and rather bring a little bit of humor into the industry, and something that we need, right? Everyone needs a little bit of upliftment, and I think that's just a wonderful way of doing so. So individuals like that will be able to share their personalities a lot better without having the fear of restriction and stuff. Not saying that he was ever scared of being restricted. I don't think so. But I'm saying that if there ever was a doubt or thought of being restricted due to X, Y, and Z, now that's kind of eliminated, right? So the big one, of course, what are our responsibilities as hunters? And I want to mention my points that I've highlighted here, that I've taken from these discussions, and then I'm gonna discuss it, right? So the importance of showcasing ethical hunting practices, emphasizing respect for wildlife, and contributing to our conversation. Tips for creating and sharing content that builds a positive narrative for the industry. Engaging in meaningful discussions, combating misinformation, and ensuring that hunting is represented responsibly in the public eye. So the first point there, the importance of showcasing ethical hunting practices, emphasizing respect for wildlife and contributing to conservation. So this point, in many of my discussions on this very podcast with guests, on my solo podcasts, whatever it may be, I've always sat and I've said, guys, hunters, we have a responsibility of showcasing our industry as best as we possibly can in a good ethical environment. Why is this so important? Because now, more than ever so before, it is allowing this freedom of being able to do what we want, when we want, and how we want, right? So previously, on a number of different posts, I would cringe in the fact that that picture is not a good picture to have, and then a couple of days later I would scroll past it again and I see it would be censored. That whole blurred out phase where you would have to click on it and then it would ask you permission, are you sure you want to, it's got sensitive content. That now is going to be exposed to the whole world without any of this censorship. So we've got a bigger responsibility now as individual hunters, as professional hunters, as outfitters, that we are putting out the content that is correct, that is ethical and sustainable. Now, a lot of us can argue that platforms such as my podcast and a couple of other ones, we might showcase the industry in a negative light. For instance, what I said on that particular podcast, and I'm going to use it as a reference, and I don't always like going back to it, but when I generalized and I said majority of the outfitters at these hunting shows are like used car salesmen, that didn't showcase them in a very positive light. And I see it now. I see how I could have worded it differently, but in saying that, it allowed for a good, honest, and open conversation. Now, do we want to go out, and unfortunately these conversations do have to happen whether we like it or not, right? But now all of a sudden Meta have given us a platform to do this with anyone. You don't have to be a hunter to listen to this podcast, but I would assume that 90% of the people listening to this podcast are hunters, right? So the conversation stays within our circle. Now with these open restrictions, anyone that is sitting on the fence about inquisitivity into the hunting industry, or they kind of are a hunter and they're kind of not sure where they lie on the ethical spectrum, these conversations are going to be had. And it's going to be a lot of back and forth. And I would like to think that myself and a couple of reputable hunters out there will be able to come onto these platforms and say, guys, listen, we see your point, but if you could see it from a completely different angle, would be a better way of us highlighting the importance of hunting as a conservation practice, just for example. So right now is the bigger, of course, pictures are a huge influence in this whole discussion. Like, you still got to understand your responsibility when pulling out the camera on a hunt, especially a hunted animal. You know, you got to treat it with respect. You got to make sure that the poses are right, that there's not a lot of blood, and the animal is respected. So making sure that we understand those sort of basics, I'm hoping would allow us to carry on this trend. Because I do generally, when I scroll through my Instagram feed, my Facebook feed, and even mostly on my TikTok stuff as well, anyone that I follow that is a hunter and that is a respectable individual within the hunting industry, especially a lot of outfitters out there have really got good content and really have taken the time to emphasize the respect of the animal and stuff. So I don't think we have to worry too much about the guys that are doing an exceptional job already. It's the newer guys and the guys that actually don't have the care that a lot of us do is where we've got to toe the line. And it's us as hunters that want to protect our industry. It's our obligation to this sort of restrictions being lifted, that we don't abuse the opportunities that are at hand. So I waffled on a little bit on that point, but I hope I got my point across to try and make everyone understand how important it is to be more responsible now than ever before. So onto point number 2, tips for creating, sharing content that builds a positive narrative for the industry. Of course, not so much YouTube, but a lot of the time whenever I did bow talk and stuff like that, there were, like I said, for very short periods of time, my content would be taken down. But anyone that was new to bow hunting, that was sitting on the fence between hunting and how they're going to do hunting, especially now with like the influence of Joe Rogan being a bow hunter, there's a lot of these younger generational kids that are coming through the ranks that only want to jump into bow hunting, right? Because Joe Rogan's doing it. It's a whole more primal way of getting involved, or whatever their reasonings are. But a lot of the conversations aren't happening because of the restrictions. My personal experience, like I said, a lot of the time when I would talk about my boat would be restricted and then you would have to appeal it and go through the whole process. Now this is being open, and so we can have a lot more positive narratives to this. So more positive discussions. It's allowed us to hold on to a very, very important topic. And then, of course, but I've touched on this, engaging in meaningful discussions, combating misfortune, and ensuring the hunting industry is represented in a responsible and reputable manner in the public eye. So, one of my biggest frustrations in the hunting industry is fellow hunters' reciprocal attitude to guys that are trying to upset the apple cart. And what I mean by this, and I'll always refer back to this podcast, but I did a podcast with the lady about the baboon situation in Cape Town. And the conversation wasn't a conversation. It was her forcing an opinion and a point across to me without being able to listen to my side of the story and why I would be an advocate for both sides. So why am I bringing this up? And here's my point, is that a lot of the time as fellow hunters, we are so sick and tired of trying to defend our industry that we lose our patience when it comes to these sort of discussions. And it's important for us now not to do that. And I hope there's a lot of guys out there that when they are willing to engage and have the simple discussion, there are a lot of guys out there that are willing to sit down and put forward points I think majority of us know and are willing to share with the rest of the community. However, we get frustrated and we'll say some nasty things and things that we don't really mean out there, but it's just the frustration of us trying to defend our industry. And now, this particular point, engaging in meaningful discussions, doesn't mean that we have to engage in every single discussion. Look, no matter, there are those situations, no matter what you try and do, no matter what point you put across, they're just never going to listen. No one's ever there to intentionally try and understand. And they're always going to try and do things to upset you as much as they possibly can. So engaging in that might not be the best, but whenever you see an opportunity that somebody is legitimately trying to understand what the industry and what our objective is all about, that is the perfect opportunity for us to come in there and have a two-way conversation and a dialogue, and create that dialogue going forward so that we can have these honest conversations. Not to necessarily try and convert him to become a hunter. Oh no, you need to eat meat and all this sort of stuff. But just understand our point of why we do what we do, and why is this such a meaningful conversation to have, and why that we would like as many people out there to understand why we're doing such a primal instinct within us. So that's going to take a lot of learning, but we need to practice being aware of those conversations and what they look like. And so when we come across them, we're not just getting our feathers up and our defensive lines in and trying to argue this point by flinging a couple of swear words and really harming the situation, instead of actually just sitting down, calming down, listening to what other people have got to say, and then generate that dialogue, because there might be some good points from both sides. You never really know. And platforms like podcasts and stuff are wonderful avenues for us to have these sort of conversations. However, not everyone's going to be a guest on a podcast or anything like that. So having the simpler form by being on social media is a great starting point. So I think that is a massive responsibility we have as hunters. So then, to close everything off, what is the call to action? So basically what I would recommend is to encourage fellow hunters to seize this opportunity to be more active and responsible in sharing their stories, and then rallying the community together to use this increased freedom as a platform for education and diversity to happen. And I hope we really do. I hope us as hunters seize this opportunity to really use it to the benefit of us, so that we go out there and generate a very, very good, reputable name for ourselves. And this point might be leaning a lot more towards professional hunters, because on my previous podcast that I did, or some of the preparation tips I did on my YouTube channel and my Carbon TV episode, is professional hunters now need to start a personal brand. Now's the best opportunity to do that. If you're wanting to get yourself out into the industry and generate a name for yourself, where people can head along and have good ethical conversations with you, but also just see the product you deliver, the service you deliver out there, now is the perfect time, because the restrictions have all been lifted. You've got the perfect opportunity to go out there and just be as raw, as authentic as you possibly can. And there's not really any excuses for you to do so. Yes, along the way, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to say things you never really meant. And that's where I hope the community guidelines come in to steer you back on the straight and narrow. So understand that us as hunters now, we've got a bigger responsibility than we've ever had before, because it's pretty much a free-for-all now. But let's use this responsibility to our benefit, to generate great, good, healthy representation for the hunting industry. So guys, nice little short, sweet, hopefully to the point topic. I felt it was very important. I felt when Mark Zuckerberg, when I watched that interview, or not an interview, but when I watched that statement being released, I thought, wow, every inch of bone in my body was just like, holy crap, this is a massive win for the hunting industry as a whole, from across all platforms, all benefits to any sort of country or anything like that as far as the hunting industry is concerned. So massive win for us. Big news coming out of the Meta side of things. And I hope it really just, it has kind of like a domino effect. Of course, we've got X doing it now. Maybe it leans over into TikTok, who knows? But yeah, right now the three biggest platforms in the world have really opened up and allowed us now to have some sort of freedom when it comes to controversial topics, and hunting is. But maybe we can change that. Maybe we can change that controversy to positivity. And I really think with a lot of the good guys we've got out there, great hunters coming through the ranks and guys that have understood the responsibility, I think we can do that. So yeah, very, very special point for me. And yeah, I'm open to discussion. So if you guys have got any more questions on this, I hope I'll be able to answer them as best as I possibly can. If not, we'll definitely get the professionals involved and try and get and knock out some uncertainty that does come from this. So yeah, so to everyone out there heading along, starting the personal brand journey, good luck, enjoy it. It's a hell of a lot of fun, frustrating at the best of times, but the journey is incredible, fun, and special. So yeah, guys, to everyone, once again, enjoy the rest of the show season. I'm hoping to do a couple more podcasts before we head off into Pretoria and do a little bit of both fitting and getting myself prepared for the upcoming season. But yeah, for myself, if you are, happy hunting. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay humble. We'll catch up with you guys soon.